This is the BBC.
This podcast is supported by advertising outside the UK. This is the BBC.
Dear brothers and sisters, all are welcome here at the Confessions podcast, whether saint or sinner.
Hello and welcome to this week's Confessions podcast here at the BBC from your friends at Radio 2. Now, you might have noticed, well, I hope you did, that Joe and me are on holiday.
Yeah, not together, of course. Well, despite Simon.
You don't know that. I might just have turned up in the chalet next door. Hi.
However, rest assured, we will be back from our separate holidays. That's separate holidays on Monday.
Darn it. And because the Confessions podcast never takes time off, coming up is one of our occasional Best of the Crypt specials.
Yeah, 4 classic confessions excavated for your listening pleasure, so do enjoy.
Please be seated.
Tonight's tale comes from Kim. Now, the thing about this confession is, I think that sometimes you read them out and you might think, yeah, I think I would probably have done the same. I understand. I would have reacted, in those circumstances, I'd have reacted in the same way. This is not one of those. This is not one of those confessions.
Yes, very good.
Well, there's one line in it which will stand out a mile where you go, you did what? Okay. Father Simon, says Kim, it's the mid-1970s and I was working for a well-known plumbing and heating company in Malden in Essex. One late afternoon, the workforce were all knocking off for the day. This involved locking sheds and vehicles, and eventually the last one out locked the yard gate. That's the way it happened, day after day, week after week. But before we could complete the locking up, a goat appeared from one of the sheds, running at full speed, and before we could react, it had butted one of my workmates, ironically, in the butt. After several more charges, avoidance tactics were employed. Can I just say this is the first appearance of a goat in a confession for a very, very long time, for many years. After several more charges, avoidance tactics were employed and the goat was caught. It conveniently had a collar on, and so a rope lead was attached. However, the goat continued to rear up and tug back to get free. We were then faced with the problem of what to do with it next, because obviously we couldn't leave it in the yard all night, as there was nothing to eat or drink. And it was then that I had a bright idea.
Is this the line?
I decided I would take the goat home for the night.
Obviously, yeah.
I mean, of course. I mean, obviously, that's what anyone would do. I decided to take the goat home for a night because, says Kim, I was sure my wife and the kids would like to see it. And then I'd take it back in the morning to find the owner. At this point, I must tell you that I had been entrusted with the company's newest van. And being the newest van in the fleet, this made me very proud indeed. And so it came to pass that myself and a workmate wrestled the goat, we're going to call him Billy, obviously, into the back of the van and tied him securely to the side, and I set off for the 4-mile journey home. You would think at some stage in this, trying to get Billy into the van, you're going to go, this is a really, really stupid idea. It was now that I became aware of the strong smell of goat in the small space of the vehicle. I can only describe the smell as pungent and heavy, displacing all oxygen in the van. I was also concerned when I heard water running.
Oh, good.
One point in the journey, he was having a wee. I hoped that it would just be a small one, but it went on and on and on. I swear it must have lasted half a mile. Look at the state of that. Half a mile of it.
Oh, dear.
So now the initial smell of Billy was joined by a warm, damp atmosphere, so thick it was almost suffocating. Arriving home, I tied Billy up at the bottom of the garden. What a ridiculous thing, Kim! And I mopped the van out. However, my family didn't seem that interested in their new stinking pet for the night, probably due to the fact that he was trying to butt them rather than let it be stroked. Isn't that funny that, you know, a wild goat that's attacked your workmate and then put in a van
Funny how that
tries to attack your family? So fed and watered, Billy was left for the night, and in the morning he was wrestled back into the van and driven back to the yard. Kim, really? Thankfully, there was no wee this time, or anything else, and we got back to the yard. I unloaded Billy and I walked him up the road adjacent to where I was working. He was bucking and tugging as we went. Funny that. I then proceeded to knock on doors, and I said, "Do you know this goat?"
This is a joke. This is the start of it.
It's not. There are some gag answers, I'm sure. And do you know who owns it? However, the answer was always no. After about 20 minutes of this, I was aware that I was getting late for work and I needed to find a home for Billy quite soon. It's fair to say the novelty of looking after a goat was quickly wearing thin. After what seemed like a million doors and a million no's, I knocked on this one door and there was no answer. I waited and knocked again. It soon became clear that there was no one home. Well, I reckon he lives here then. I reasoned. I mean, obviously.
Yeah, of course.
So I tied Billy to the back door and I walked down the garden path and went to work. I'm sure you've acted responsibly all the way through this. It's at this point I have to ask for forgiveness. Firstly, to the other plumbers who shared the van and had to endure eau de goat for some days to come. Secondly, to the homeowner from Tenterfield Road who arrived home to find that they had a new pet and that they couldn't get out of their back door or into the garden. Thirdly, to Billy, who might feel just a little annoyed, but he did find a lovely new home. Well, most bizarre behaviour there, Kim. I mean, you have to say, at no stage would anyone else in the world think, I know, I'm going to take the goat home and see what my family make of it. So anyway, interesting, very funny, sitcom style there from Kim. What do you say, Sister Bobby?
Well, we had a goat once under the stairs.
Oh, hang on a second. There's another line I never thought I'd hear. No, you didn't.
Yes, we did.
Well, that's not fair.
He was recovering from an injury.
Well, I'm not at all surprised.
So we put him under the stairs.
Is this a circus goat?
No, it was, unfortunately, it was going to be put down, so Mum saved it. And
how did she save the goat?
Well, it got attacked, you see, so we took it to the vets, and the vet said it needs to be supported on something while it gets its feelings back. So we brought it home, put it under the stairs, obviously in a space, made it like unstable.
Where else would you
Because it was the safest warm place while it recovered, and it did recover, learnt to walk again, and it was fine. But I wouldn't recommend it.
What was it called?
I can't remember what the goat was called, actually. Anyway, but what I was going to say was about
What
Kim.
kind of a goat was it?
It was a really big one.
Big
but
goat.
It wasn't a male one. They smell worse. It was a female goat. Anyway, moving on. I admired Kim for taking the goat home. But, of course, there are many national organisations and local ones that, of course, you could have called and done something else. But
Maybe not in the 70s.
So first, yes, there was. There was at least one. There was the...
Was there? The
Yeah,
National
the
Goat
RSPCA.
League.
You know, it's the RSPCA. Anyway, I admire you for taking responsibility and taking care of the goat. But it seems it ran out because you took it home, made sure it was okay. Then you put it back in the van and took it back to where it came from. But then you left it tied to somebody else's house.
Yes, that's right.
That's the thing. You just go, you were so forgiven until that point.
Yeah. It could have been the right house. It could have been the right house. They were just out getting some straw and some carrots.
Looking for their
or
goat.
whatever it is.
So Kim, because you were doing so well, but in the end, no, you're not forgiven.
Brother Matthew.
Well, I mean, what this boils down to is Kim is basically moving a goat around because we don't know how this goat turns up at his yard.
No.
And then he says, well, I can't leave the goat overnight at the yard because there's no shelter and there's no food, so I'll take it home with me where I will put it in the garden. And well, no shelter in the garden. And am I feeding? No, I'm not feeding it because it's butting me all the time. And then I'm just going to go and leave it with some person who's not in, and therefore is fully qualified to look after goats. So I'm not going to forget. I don't understand where you thought any of this was a good idea. So I'm not going to forgive.
Has to say, Billy the goat gets out of this a lot better than the last goat that turned up.
Yeah,
on Confessions,
something involving a
while
hole.
back.
The Confessions Podcast.
Dear Father Simon and the collective, I have finally decided to share with you an incident that happened 2 to 3 years ago, which still makes me cringe and laugh in equal measure whenever I think of it. In relieving this memory, I'm mostly concerned about the sensitivity and innocence of Mother Superior. I know she's led a somewhat cloistered life.
Innocent? Sorry?
As have I. And can easily be made to feel uncomfortable and confused, particularly when it comes to the opposite sex. Also similar to me, says Kat. Do you recognise yourself in this?
Yeah, I am actually, Rebecca, true innocent. I've led a very sheltered life, so I can identify with Kaz at this
However,
moment.
Kaz continues, I still feel compelled to ask forgiveness from the whole collective, as absolution will make me rest easier at night. On the day in question, I'd received a phone call from my friend Amy. weeks trying to comfort her friend, who shall remain anonymous, after the demise of a relationship. I knew the girl in question, although not well, and was happy to help my friend Amy, as she'd been dealing with the situation for the whole morning and was feeling somewhat ragged. Amy felt I could offer support to them both, and I agreed, resisting opening the wine until they'd arrived. At this time, my husband, who I'll call BB, short for Big Bear, and so called as he's fairly gentle, very hirsute and handy in housework, was upstairs and hadn't heard the phone conversation at all. He was cutting his hair, and always does this on our landing. We have a full-length mirror there and several plug sockets, so the job is made easier as he can check his hair whilst cutting it and hoover the carpet when he's finished. Are we all okay so far?
Yeah.
Mother Superior, I'm looking at you. You okay so far?
I'm fine.
Okay. As already mentioned, he's not exactly smooth-skinned in the chest department, so the vacuum has the extra function of being used to remove any loose hairs which have become entangled in his chest hair.
He hoovers his chest.
When he's cut his hair, it gets caught in his chest hair,
Yes.
so he uses the hoover to get rid of the loose hair. Steady on, I'm only halfway through.
Yeah, I'll bet.
Not something you could do, I imagine, Mr. Mayo.
Anyway, what?
Hoover your chest.
No, absolutely. It looks completely hoovered already. I'm a bit Jamie Cullum in that way. You might like to know. Anyway, my two guests arrived, and wine was quickly poured. That's on basis of what I've been told.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, my two guests arrived, and wine was quickly poured to help alleviate what I knew was going to be a painful couple of hours of offering such platitudes concerning fish and sea, and he was never good enough for you anyway, along with the endless analysing of the relationship. The wine was a necessity. Before we started on this epic counselling session, I suggested they pop upstairs to say hi to BB, where he was clearing up from his haircut. I soon heard a shout of shock and laughter from Amy, a profanity from my husband, and a strange noise from our acquaintance. I didn't know that he decided to have a shower directly after cutting his hair, so Amy and her friend were subjected to the somewhat unsettling sight of my husband standing stark naked in front of a full-length mirror, vacuuming his body. As soon as he realised he got company, he tried to protect his modesty, but with the vacuum in hand, things, shall we say, didn't go to plan. I fear no amount of explanation could alter the situation, apart from possibly making matters worse. My part in this bizarre scenario being shared with the girl who was already upset was the fact that I know my husband often takes a shower after a haircut. I should have checked on his state of undress. The only excuse I have is that my mind was elsewhere, possibly with a glass of wine. I don't seek forgiveness from BB, my husband. The vacuum setting was on low and he didn't need to go to A&E. Nor do I ask forgiveness for upsetting Amy, as she's been a friend for years and knows my husband and his little foibles well. Which kind of says not a euphemism for anything else, says Kaz. My quest for forgiveness is to do with our anonymous erstwhile acquaintance who we've not seen since, and the fact that we may have damaged her opinion of the opposite sex and scarred her mentally for life. I can report that all is well, and nothing was broken in the making of this confession. Kaz, thank you very much indeed. I don't think we've had not many hairdressing confessions, and certainly our first Hoover-based.
Chest hoovering-based confession.
Chest hoovering, I just think
this
that's...
has all the makings of a brilliant slapstick comedy, doesn't it? I think it's the husband's fault for doing something as bizarre as vacuuming his chest. I mean, there must be other ways of getting rid of little bits of hair in your chest.
Well, I
Matt,
would have...
Simon,
What?
no, can you help me out here?
Yeah, no.
I don't know. Just brushing it free. It does seem a bit bizarre, doesn't it? So yes. I think it's more like the husband's fault than Kaz's fault, and no harm was done.
And after
in
the
shower,
it's... You would
also,
have thought
I mean, was it a bit wet? And wouldn't it be dangerous to have the electrical appliance? You know?
I just think you don't want to have a Hoover.
Anywhere near
don't
you.
Want to use a Hoover.
Absolutely. When you're
just be
like
clothed. Be clothed when you... I don't know if there's an official warning in...
I totally agree. So I think, Kaz, you are completely forgiven.
Yeah.
I'm sure that your erstwhile acquaintance wasn't. I I'm sure she found it very amusing.
Mother Superior.
See, I'm not so much worried about the hoovering of the chest. I'm more worried about the hoovering of other parts of his body. I'm not a bloke, clearly, but even I found that a painful idea.
Yes.
I mean, I do remember once my son, when he was about 2 years old, I caught him relieving himself in the Hoover tube, fortunately. Seriously, fortunately, it wasn't switched on at the time. Otherwise, I dread to think what could have happened. But actually, that really did happen. It just reminded me of that.
He'll love you for that.
Yeah. Sorry, Harry. But anyway, so I don't think. I mean, I think that I think it made a really horrible situation very funny. I mean, I'm sure that whoever was really upset about their boyfriend leaving them must have found that funny, and it must have improved them. So I would say I would forgive you.
Okay. Maybe there, based on what you've just, maybe there is room for Hoover confessions. What do you say, Matt?
I'm gratified to hear that it didn't involve a trip to A&E, but this sounded like it had A&E written all over it. This has got, I was in the shower and I slipped and all that happened afterwards. I get the feeling that the husband got a secret thrill out of the Hoover being on his chest after the shower. That's why he was doing it. And frankly, more fool him for being caught. Well, why didn't you hear people coming up the stairs? That's what I don't. Well, why were you still hoovering your chest? No, it was on low. It was on low, the Hoover. So don't use your Hoover for that, obviously, kids. Or for anything else, as it turns out.
Just for hoovering the floor.
Sally's son. So I'm going to forgive.
The Confessions Podcast.
This is from Davy Jones, not my real name, of course. Father Simon and the Flying Angels of Mercy, having just heard your confession from Ed the zookeeper. He did too, you remember, a couple of weeks back. It reminded me of my rather nautical tale, which took place nearly 35 years ago. I was a young second officer sailing on large container ships between major ports in northwest Europe and Canada. When I recall what happened on this one particular westbound voyage, the barnacles on the back of my neck stand up with pride to salute the good old red ensign. Each voyage from Europe to Canada and back involved a double crossing of the North Atlantic Ocean. Being a British flag vessel, the MV had a full complement of British officers. The crew comprised of an old boatswain with a peg leg and a black eye patch, and his motley bunch of ABs, which is of course able-bodied seamen, all from the Liverpool pool of seafarers. A tough bunch of salty sea dogs who, when on leave, resided in the local park, under the bench and badly lit smoke rooms of public houses, waiting until they were shanghaied and sent to the next available ship needing crew.
This is a movie.
It is almost, yes. Their only possessions in life were a British seaman's card, discharge book, and a few items of clothing in a small cardboard box tied up with string. Before leaving Le Havre at the end of the 9-day ocean crossing, you sensed bad weather was on the way, when the ship's rats were seen throwing themselves into the traps and the cockroaches were scurrying down the gangway. You get the picture. The voyage started bumpy as we dropped the outbound French port pilot and gradually became worse as we passed Land's End. Within 24 hours, we were in a very uncomfortable, full-blown Force 9 storm with high seas and swell. The ship began rolling and pitching violently, reducing the ship's speed from 18 to 8 knots. Now, on day 2 of the voyage, the weather moderated enough for the chief officer to send me out onto the decks to perform a safety check of the cargo and the ship, also for any storm damage. This involved a full inspection of the decks with the boatswain and one AB to assist in any hard work, if necessary, because deck officers didn't get their hands dirty. Halfway through the inspection, we noticed that one of the tank containers had lost its customs seal and was dripping a brownish-coloured liquid from the discharge manifold onto the deck. The boatswain, with a keen nose for alcohol, took a taste. He waited a second. His eyes opened wide as he exclaimed, "It's whiskey."
Oh, yes.
It didn't surprise me one bit, I said, and went on to tell this Jack Sparrow lookalike that it was quite possibly a highly valued brand of malt, as we tended to carry a lot in bulk from Scotland to Canada on this particular service. So I told the boatswain that I wouldn't report the leaking tank container, as it didn't cause a danger to the ship, and I wouldn't stop the leak and replace the customs seal until just before we docked into Montreal a week later. The boatswain and the AB looked like they'd just won the lottery. Now, this is where I seek forgiveness. 1. For keeping quiet about the dripping tank container and allowing the bosun and his crew to use a free alcohol tap for a week. 2. From the owners of the container for the damage and the loss of over 1,000 litres, which is 1 metric tonne, of an alcohol-based concentrate. What's that? Lastly, and mostly, from the owners of the cargo, the Canadian Zoological Research Society, who couldn't understand why the dead 400-pound gorilla they were transporting in the tank from a zoo in Europe arrived without the preserving fluid.
Oh, what?
that it had been shipped in.
Oh, I say.
I would like to state that the crew suffered no ill effects from their consumption of large quantities of the liquid, and when they eventually paid off the ship in Felixstowe, each took home a bottle of the stuff as part of their duty-free allowance. Yours repentantly, Davy Jones, not my real name. So they'd been drinking for a week. They'd been drinking gorilla juice, basically. Gorilla preservative. Which presumably, well, he says it's an alcohol-based concentrate, so it did taste of alcohol, but it also tasted of gorilla, or dead gorilla. Anyway, it's a cracking story. Thank you, Davey. Let's see what happens here with Sister Rebecca.
That is an amazing story.
Yes.
What a twist. I don't think we've had a confession with such an amazing twist.
We
that
just don't
made
know
us
what's
all
coming.
go,
Don't know what's coming.
Horrified. Yeah, I don't know what to say about this. 1,000 litres went missing. Does that mean they couldn't have drank 1,000 litres, presumably? It just leaked and some of it went
Well, some of it
overboard,
leaked and some of it,
and
yes,
some
exactly.
of them ended
Yes,
up in
I
their
think so.
stomachs. Well, I mean, they didn't obviously suffer any harm from it.
Don't
in
try
fact,
this
they
at home,
enjoyed
by
it
the
so
way.
much.
If you have a gorilla, a dead gorilla, sort of in formaldehyde,
kids, don't
leave
do
it
that.
alone, kids. Don't.
Yeah,
Different
I mean,
times.
they enjoyed it so much they took a bottle with them. It's not like it caused them any problems. So I'm going to forgive because it's also a fantastic story.
So I wonder, we should hear from the Canadian Zoological Research Society. Anyway, what do you think, Sister Bobby from the Priory?
Gorillas in the mist, gorillas in the fridge, gorillas in the tank.
We've had all kinds of gorillas, haven't we? Yes.
Actually, I don't think I can forgive because you didn't know it wouldn't cause any ill effects. And I think what I'm surprised at is they didn't know a good whiskey or even a bad whiskey when they.
But you don't know what gorilla juice tastes like.
Well,
I mean, it might taste
it
like a
wouldn't
good
taste like
malt.
whiskey. I doubt it. But I think it's way too dangerous to play with. I mean, did he know about the cargo? Did he know it was...
I don't know. That's not clear. He just says... yeah, he probably did.
Yeah,
But
he did. I would say you are playing with fire.
Playing with fire.
Yeah, so no, unforgiven, way too dangerous.
All right, okay, let's see what Matthew makes
We
of
could
this
be
then.
onto something if it does turn out that gorillas pickled in whatever preservative does
And
taste like
alcohol-based
whiskey.
concentrate.
Yeah, that would really be something. And that comes up on the duty free, does it? Anything to declare that?
It
Well,
would
I've got
be
this
like-
gorilla juice.
Like that bottle of spirit from your holiday that sits on the
Yes.
back shelf. Yeah,
Looks a bit
gorilla, I
green.
think, yeah.
Yeah, well, no, it's perfectly normal. I'm definitely going to forgive, even though I would personally, I make it one of my life's little laws not to get on a boat where one of the sailors has got an eye patch and a peg leg, or indeed a gorilla pickled in one of the containers. So I'm going to forgive just for that.
The Confessions Podcast.
Dear Father Simon and the Broad-Minded Collective. Well, we'll see about that. Having recently heard the tale of the unexpected consequences of an unwanted bowl of chocolate breakfast cereal discarded from a flat window, I
wasn't here for that one. That sounds a cracker.
Did he have a voiceover that for a show?
I can't remember what I was doing.
Public appearance, was it?
For the taxman, I have no idea what he's talking about.
Well, basically, it was a bowl of chocolate cereal, was chucked out of a student window and landed on a priest.
Oh, no.
Which is always good for...
Yeah, always good for a laugh.
Oh,
I'll say it for you. Yeah.
I feel the need, says Moz, to confess the details of the Battle of Fort Northwood that occurred nearly 30 years ago. I'd spent 3 years studying for a degree at a polytechnic in the North Midlands. This particular institution, in common with many of its ilk, had little money to spend on lavish student accommodation, and this one had taken a lease on an 11-storey block of former council flats in the city that had been recently condemned. In the opinion of the college administration, this made it perfect for first-year students. Hey, first-year students, hope Freshers' Week is going well, by the way.
They don't care, though, do they? They don't even notice their surroundings.
Is that right?
Yes, it is.
Is that what happens?
Yes.
Even if you're in a condemned block of flats.
Sadly, I think you're right.
The 40-plus flats of Northwood Court each had a balcony, affording expansive views of a decaying post-industrial wasteland.
Lovely.
Says Moz, I was one of a large number of students who arrived as a result of the panicky search for any place on any course, commonly known as clearing, usually in order that we could leave home as soon as possible. As the college filled this block from the bottom up, I found myself on the top floor. As one might expect, most of the population of this block were an unpromising mix of steady thinkers and ne'er-do-wells that mostly failed to make it past the hurdle of end-of-year exams and quietly faded into obscurity. However, in the snow of February 1986, that whole population of misfits pulled together as one in a glorious hurrah that became known as the Battle of Fort Northwood. The local population viewed us with well-justified contempt and suspicion, and one student standing on their first-floor balcony having a smoke was just too great a temptation for a passing group of local youths on a cold, snowy evening, and thus the first snowball was thrown and hit home. This was responded to by a volley gathered from the modest amount of snow that had settled on the balcony. This brief volley was enough to exhaust this meagre supply of snow, and the member of that flat dashed next door to continue the exchange. The besieging forces had almost limitless supplies of snow, of course, and soon their numbers had swelled to several dozen. Defenders on the first and second floors were at great risk of being hit, and so they slowly retreated floor by floor up the building. It's like a movie. The snow...
You're painting a fantastic picture.
Thank you. The snow on the balconies was finally exhausted. The defenders were beyond the reach of the attackers, and this is where it should have ended. But fate dealt one last card to the defenders. This came in the form of a large stock pot full of vegetable curry.
What?
One of my flatmates, Paul, had cooked up some weeks before, but had never got round to eating.
It's like Lord of the Rings. You know, they start
But with
pouring
curry.
boiling tar from the top.
I see what you're saying, yes. It was clearly well beyond human consumption. Originally, it was chock full of saucy goodness, carrots, lentils, a potato or two, but that was a while back. Now, it looked like green slime. Paul and I took a run up and hurled the contents of the pot over the edge of the balcony towards a large knot of our tormentors. The beautiful, spectacular descent spread the gallon or so of curry into a fine, reeking mist that settled upon the youths, who then fled shrieking away from the walls of Fort Northwood, pursued by the cheers of the brave defenders, knowing that the delicate seasoning of saffron, masala paste, goji berries, and oregano leaves was being put to good if unexpected use. The chances of all that being in a curry in 1986 in a student flat, I would suggest, is zero. Had anyone ever heard of goji berries in 1986?
And oregano?
I don't think so. The whole place stank of vegetable madras, as did, I learnt later, a local councillor who was leafleting the area. Oops. All there was to show of the battle the next morning on the way to lectures was a large area of yellow snow with only a few white patches to show where people had stood. Quite good for snow clearance, by the way, for future reference. I need forgiveness from all the local youths who should not have started... Actually, I don't want forgiveness from all the local youths who should not have started throwing snowballs in the first place, but I do ask forgiveness from their mothers, who almost certainly were asked to wash a multitude of items of clothing, and they learnt that turmeric never really comes out. Oh, and that mystery ingredient, which they might have struggled with, which Paul always added to his curries, that was beetroot. We're ever so sorry. I have to say this is quite an extraordinary vegetable curry for 1986, because in my experience, it was just like a carrot and some curry sauce.
If you were lucky.
Well, exactly.
You were lucky to...
There's a whole sketch there.
There is.
But here we are, we're in the industrial wasteland of the North Midlands in a poly. We're on the 11th floor, and here's a gallon of vegetable madras, full of saucy goodness, apparently. But anyway, it ended up over local youths. What do you say, Sister
Well,
Rebecca?
my first reaction was that to suddenly bring curry into a snowball fight was not fair, because it was a snowball fight, and that's the whole point. I mean, you don't start throwing different objects at each other during a snowball fight. So
if you come across come across a vat of curry.
Well, that was my first reaction. But then I remembered that the local youths had started it.
Yeah,
so
and you had limited snow, didn't you?
Well,
limited snow.
That's also true. But then it's all about the mothers. And actually, if I was one of their mothers, I wouldn't forgive these students. I mean, students are annoying at the best of times, but to hear that a student
That I can tell.
thrown a
Why
pot
are
of
students
curry.
annoying?
Oh, for various reasons.
You were a student once, weren't
Of course I was. Of course I was.
Were you
That's
annoying?
why I feel. Yes, I was deeply annoying. Anyway, I think, if I was one of their mothers, I wouldn't forgive. So
Because of the turmeric.
because of the stains from the curry, and to have curry thrown at your little loved one by a student from the 10th
They were
floor.
ruffians. Anyway, let's see what the dean makes of it.
I would generally forgive, I think, because you added colour to that area.
Thanks. I tried.
Much needed colour to that whole area anyway that you were living in. But I'm sorry for the local councillor, you see. He got all caught up in that, didn't he? You should have checked really to see whether anyone was there. But generally, you're forgiven. Good, yeah, it was a good fight. I'd have joined in that.
So I added colour to the decaying post-industrial wasteland.
I think so, yeah.
It was
too American.
It was a bit drab.
I'll tell you what we'll do. Let's brighten it up with a bit of curry.
Dull place to live. Let's spray vegetable curry in a nice,
fantastic.
neat cloud.
Let's not.
Now, Matt always likes a student.
Yes, love students. Can't get enough of them.
Here we go.
I'm no expert on military tactics, but it strikes me that if you're going to get into a fight, at least make sure you've got enough supplies. And if you're going to be in a snowball fight, then I don't think it's okay to then say, "Oh, we've run out of snow. Let's just use anything that comes down. Let's just use my vat of curry." Well, no, you should be using snow, and if you've and also you've got the advantage of being higher up than them. So I am a coward's way out, and plus students. So on both accounts guilty. So not forgiven.
Strict rules of snowballs, Mr. Bond.
What?
Strict rules of snowballs. He's saying that you can't change from snowballs. You see.
What? Strict rules of what? Snowballs?
What's it got to do with Mr.
You don't know
Bond?
from the film.
This is the point. I don't know what he's talking
From a
about.
film. From a film.
The Confessions Podcast.
And that's it for this week's Confessions from the Crypt special. Back to normal on the radio on Monday from 5. See you then.
See you then.
The Confessions Podcast. Go in peace.